How's it going, everybody? My name is Mitchell. I'm going to be talking about my car accident story back in the summer of 2013. I was actually starting my first week of senior year and my first week at my first job, which was McDonald's in Tracy. Definitely pretty excited to be starting both. And what ended up happening was I was riding my bicycle to work, which was McDonald's, and in the intersection of Carl Hall and 11th Street, I was sitting there waiting for the light to turn green and the little crosswalk guide to pop up. And as soon as that little crosswalk guide popped up, I looked left, I looked right, and then I hopped on my bike. And what I forgot to end up doing was look left one more time before I went out into the street. But sure enough, the last thing that I saw was a silver sedan, and then bam, lights out. And I ended up waking up inside the ambulance. I remember looking at the paramedic, and he looked at me. He's all, "Do you know what your name is?" I'm all, "Yeah, my name is Mitchell." He's all, "Do you know how old you are?" I was like, "I have no idea how old I am." He's all, "Do you know what happened?" I'm all, "I have no idea what happened." And he's like, "You got smacked by a car and you're going to be getting life flight out of here." And I remember he just had kind of like a happiness to him, and like just a slight smile, because he's probably just so happy that I was alive. They probably thought I was dead. And I ended up passing out, and then I woke up to the ambulance doors opening and then the sun beaming straight into my face, just like how it is in the movies, and I couldn't see anything. I passed out. I ended up waking up to the helicopter landing and them loading me into the helicopter. I ended up passing out. I woke up landing at the trauma center in Modesto. I passed out. I ended up waking up again inside the hospital. I passed out, and then I woke up to some of my family members being there. I remember my uncle came up to me, just seeing how I was doing to make sure I was okay. And the only other thing that I remember is one of my cousins came up to me, and all I could do is hear everybody's voice, hard voices, and he asked me, "Can you put a thumbs up for me?" And sure enough, all I remember, I don't think I even said anything. All I could do is hear him, and I went and put my thumbs up, and I gave that for him. And I think I remember he saying, "Good job," or somewhere along those lines. And the rest of the 2 weeks was just kind of a blur. Later on, my cousin did tell me that for about like 2 weeks or so, I repeated myself every single day, saying I looked left, I looked right, and then smack. That was it. And like I said, that's how I was for the first couple weeks. I guess just repeating myself. I couldn't remember anything. Later on, that they did tell me that I broke my collarbone, I shattered my shoulder blade, I broke 3 ribs, it put 3 holes in my lung deflated. I had, I think, over 100 staples in my back from the windshield slicing it open, glass stuck in my face, my head was swollen like an egg. But you know what? Thank God for saving my life, because I don't think too many people would have survived that, and especially with the injuries I got, I probably should have been paralyzed or probably died immediately on impact. But later on, when I was inside the hospital, they had a chest tube in me and hooked up to morphine and IVs and a whole bunch of crazy stuff. And I remember when one time they went to go, I guess, reinflate my lung, the doctor had like this little thing, like a dial that went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And my aunt was there. She's like, "Oh, are you just going to start slowly?" And the doctor said, "Yes. Oh, we're going to make sure we start slow." And 1 to 10, 0 to 100 real quick. And I remember when my lung got inflated, I went to go take a deep breath, and I wanted to scream because it's so painful. And I remember grabbing onto the sheets, and like what my aunt was saying, my eyes rolled in the back of my head, and I ended up passing out. And I'm pretty sure they thought they killed me because she said the doctor was going, Mitchell, Mitchell, wake up, wake up. And I finally snapped out of it. And I remember saying, how about let's not do that again. That was probably one of the most painful things that I went through. Later on, they tried to give me, laxative. So I told them I didn't want it. Never liked laxative. And so they're all, well, we have to give it to you. I was like, are you sure? They're all, yep, we have to. And I remember just a small cup of water. They put some laxative in it. As soon as I took the first sip, they're all, that wasn't so bad. And I went, bleh. I threw up everywhere. It was pretty gross. And, during the time I was there, I wasn't eating. I probably weighed 125, 130 pounds, and, I'm 6'3". So I, was definitely, pretty skinny. And I remember also too being hooked up to morphine, and that stuff was pretty crazy. I remember rolling off and falling off my hospital bed, but I never hit the floor and I was just floating. Another time I was sitting in the recliner, sitting straight up like how I am, but I thought I was laying down in the hospital bed. And so that stuff got me pretty loopy. There's been a couple of times they forgot to replace the bag, and I was hitting the button for the nurse to come, and it was just so painful. I remember like kind of knocking over the trays, and a couple people had to come down and hold me down in the chair, and I was just crying and yelling because I'd never been in so much pain in my life. And during the time when I was there, I didn't shower or didn't get any type of bath, and what had happened was they had to wipe me with baby wipes. And I mean, since you're so injured and hurt, you just want to be taken care of. It just, it sucked. Then when I went through the phase of physical therapy, I remember I got up and take one step, take two steps, and I'll just be out of breath going, and this is with me having the chest tube, the monitor, stuff all hooked up to me. And they try to get me to walk every single day. I could barely take one or two steps. I had to relearn how to walk. And I'm all, it's kind of, unbelievable. And later on, I'll say probably like the third day that they had me up walking, this one nurse, she was probably maybe 4'11" or maybe 5 foot. And she's all, we got to get you up walking. And I'm all, I don't think it's a good idea. And she's all, yeah, we're going to get you up walking. So I remember I took one step, I took the second step, and the next thing you know, I passed out. I woke up to this little nurse holding me, and I'm just slouched over the top of her, and all I remember is her yelling, someone please get a wheelchair. And the next thing you know, there's about 10 nurses running all over the place, like, where's the wheelchair, where's the wheelchair? And she was probably holding me for a good 3 or 4 minutes. Finally got a wheelchair and put me back to my room, and then I never saw her since. I remember this one part that this janitor used to come and visit me every single day. I can't remember his name, but he was the coolest person ever, and I know he kind of felt like, he felt really bad for me. So one day he would check on me, see how I was doing. Then the next day he brought me in an Xbox. Then the day after that he brought some bootleg movies in. He's all, man, some of these movies are in the theaters, or I actually haven't even hit the theaters yet. He's all, I brought it just for you so you can enjoy it before the movies even come out. And I'll never forget that. And I'll say probably a day later, I never knew what code blue was, and I guess code blue means someone's died or someone is dying. And I remember the room next to me, I just heard this loud thump, and I was like, that's definitely did not sound good. Then I see a whole bunch of nurses run into the other room. The guy, I guess he must have put him on the stretcher and took him out of the room, and then they left, and never saw that person again either. And I thought that was pretty crazy, but again, I didn't know what code blue was. And I remember getting sent down to was it trauma center? No, the ICU. And when I was down in the ICU, I guess that's the floor where everybody's dying, so I hear code blue, and 20 minutes later, code blue. And I didn't know I was on the floor where everybody was dying, so not sure if I was even going to make it at that point. But when I was down on that floor, I remember this one nurse would come into my room every single day, have a great conversation with me. She always did, my x-rays, and I was getting x-rays every single day. It was, kind of ridiculous. But they also told me later on they were going to have to prep me up for surgery to reattach my lung, but they also told me I had these things called blebs on my left lung. And what it is, I'm not sure what the technical medical term for it is, but it's found in tall, skinny people, and it's these white specks that's on your lung that make your lung collapse anyways. And they said usually 90% of the time it would be in my other lung, and then one day randomly it was just collapse. So I never really always had a fear of it, but sometimes when my lung does hurt, I was like, oh great, is it going to collapse today? But besides the point, they prepped me up for surgery, and I remember laying on the table, and the only thing I had on was my underwear, but I'm pretty sure, they cut that off later on. But the room was, so cold, and before they put me to sleep, I remember they told me to count backwards, and 10, 9, 8. I'm pretty sure I didn't make it to 7. Bam, I was out. Later on, when I woke up from surgery, I remember they were pushing me down the hallway, and I thought I was going 1,000 miles per hour. It kind of felt like like a NASCAR. And my aunt and uncle were next to me, and I told them, man, I'm going so fast down the hallway, this is crazy. And they started laughing, and that was pretty much the wrap of my story. But I do remember when I had him in the chest tube, it was just so awful. They had me laying on my right side, and later on, this one doctor, his name was Dr. DeGraff Johnson, he was the one who did my surgery, and he was going to be taking out the chest tube. He told me, he's like, what's your favorite thing to drink? I'm all, my favorite thing to drink is root beer. I love drinking root beer. It was okay, just imagine you just sucking in the whole amount of root beer, the biggest bar of root beer that you can have. So I'll go, he's okay, let's do it again. And I had to do that 3 or 4 more times. He had the chest tube and just ripped it right out. And then slapped Vaseline, put a patch on, and he's all, man, that didn't hurt at all. So he's probably, one of the coolest doctors, that I ever met. And, I'm just thankful to, be alive. I just wanted to also to let everyone know this is my first video that I'm making, and, hopefully you enjoyed, part of the story. I do have a ton of crazy more stories, but I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this one up, and I just want to say thank you guys.